I'm absolutely more than a year late to this video, but I've only noticed this topic upon a rewatch. It's probably been pointed out before. I'm just gonna put that as a disclaimer. Otherwise, hi, I'm back. Usual excuses. I moved. And because I moved, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do my makeup like a bunch of characters in the show that I'm talking about.
My pronouns are she, but not her. Because I'll never be her.
And then I just gave up on nobody in Arcane knows who Beastie Boys are.
Brass monkey, that funky monkey. Brass monkey junkie, that funky monkey.
But this is like the only clean t-shirt I had because we don't have a working washing machine here yet. But during this move, I've been rewatching Arcane with my dad because it's a show about fathers and daughters as much as it's a show about sisters and science. Also because I thought his mind would just be blown by the incredibly hyper-realistic, most beautiful animation I've ever seen. He kept asking me, are you sure this is in Japanese? Anyway, I noticed something I didn't when I first watched it. How 2 of 3 of my favorite characters are incredibly similar. Like down to actual mirrored images, as if they were each other's reflection on 2 very different sides of the same coin. I could be wrong, but I think they are the only 2 characters from the intertwining storylines between Piltover and the Undercity that never actually met. And maybe, just maybe, I don't know, how much they could have helped each other out of their Greek tragic, almost Icarusian, too far gone character arcs if they had met before all of this happened. Also, I just want to make a disclaimer. Before I get weird comments, because this is a video comparing a male character to a female character, this is not like a shipping thing. I just want to make that clear. I ship both of them with a therapist. Also, one more disclaimer. I don't know anything about League of Legends, and I'm not going to pretend like I do. I'm just talking about the show. So if they are actually like besties in the game, my bad. But this is strictly about the show, strictly about season 1.
Oh, the misery. Every single person is my enemy.
Both of them born with the gift of an incredible mind inclined towards science and the curse of incredibly bad timing, Jinx and Victor share a lot more similarities than I think Jinx and Silco do. Silco has, like, sideline little sibling, also harmed by his older one on her. Maybe his ambition, but Victor has that very same ambition you see throughout the show as he swaps his cane for crutches, and his coughing sounds increasingly worse till he's, spoilers, literally on his deathbed, at the cost to his own health. Ambition to his own detriment. There's a scene where Jinx says,
he thinks I'm weak, and I'm gonna show him. Oh, I'm gonna show him. Y'all see.
And it cuts to him, dreary and weak, a certain torture behind his eyes. I believed it was framed this way on purpose because of course Jinx shares this with him, disregard for her both physical and mental health in her own ambitious, determined quest. Not the same thing, of course. Very different things, actually. But they share a lot more than that. They're both from the Undercity, and although Victor eventually crawled his way up to the top, he never made anyone forget it. The whole reason he wanted Hextech to accelerate progress, the reason he bargained his body and his mind for more time, was so he could live to see what it does. His intention staying pure throughout, to help and heal the impoverished and sick people who resided in his home. Jinx, while partially infected with Silco's all but justified resentment toward the Topsiders, has every reason to also hate them in the name of where she comes from. Her parents killed by enforcers and, while unbeknownst to her at the time, one arresting her older sister while she was attempting to run back to her, holding her in a cell where she was starved and beaten for years, leaving Jinx to think she was dead and leave her traumatized, still childlike mind susceptible to madness. Both of them are natural-born engineers. While not being able to receive proper education as children, the pair of them are seen tinkering with their animated gadgets they managed to make despite that fact in scenes that take place before the events of Jinx's debut. In Victor's flashback scene, the character Singe, which, sidebar, is partly responsible for Victor's downfall, though he had made the choice to augment himself with Shimmer in a desperate attempt to stay alive, to, again, have more time, but he certainly didn't help Jinx's through no choice of her own. Anyway, it's here he tells Victor,
loneliness is often the byproduct of a gifted mind.
The very same unique loneliness only people like Jinx and Victor could feel, isolated by worlds they were gifted to innovate. Both have had their fair share of living as someone else's shadow, Jinx twice with Vi and Silco. Victor literally shown here covered by Jace's face. Both of them with an immovable drive to prove themselves, after a lifetime of each of them hearing that they can't do things. Jinx, of course, being called a Jinx, Victor mentioning overcoming his adversities early on in the show.
Nobody's ever believed in me. Poor cripple from the Undercity. I was an outsider the moment I stepped foot in Piltover. I didn't have the benefits of a patron or a name. I simply believed in myself.
Both of them so desperate for a legacy that they aren't aware they'll get in the way of themselves.
Oh, the misery. Every single person is my enemy.
As Heimerdinger says to Victor,
It's a sad truth that those who shine brightest often burn fastest.
both of these characters have been more than unlucky when it comes to timing. Jinx literally earned her name because of it. If she didn't explode that building at the time that she did, Claggor and Milo would have survived, maybe giving Vander a shot as well. With Victor, it's a little different. Through no fault of his own, he developed a fatal disease. It's never named, but Jace mentions it's likely from the fumes that Victor grew up surrounded by, which, in tragic irony, is what he was working towards a cure for. During that conversation with Heimerdinger that I mentioned, he talks about legacy.
I suppose your legacy has been well secured. As one of Piltover's founders, what haven't you to show for your remarkable life?
You should be proud of what you've accomplished, Victor.
Figments. My contributions will be short-lived, even in your memory.
I think it's with this realization that he desperately grasps for anything to buy him more time, leading him to the Singed plot, forever painfully augmenting his body in exchange for a legacy. Similar to Jinx again in that way, both of them with a hunger to be known on their own terms, with Jinx correcting Vi anytime she calls her Powder, along with an intense need to prove herself worthy of being Silco's equal. During this storyline, we see Victor run for the first time, him dropping his cane, now being carried by his shimmered foot, which in hindsight is much like Icarus taking flight, because later that episode, in a frenzy of adding more shimmer to his body, losing control of this experiment, the one person who ever truly appreciated him and saw him for what he was walks in. Sky is seen in Victor's childhood flashback, likely an old friend of his, maybe even more given how nervous she is around him. As this accident happens, Sky tries desperately to drag Victor's body away, only to be burned alive by the shimmer. The only person he knew from his past, the only person who truly appreciated his work, gone, because of him. In the midst of crying in denial, Victor finds the papers Sky was carrying, letters to him detailing just how much she sees him. Beyond Jace's shadow, the face of Hextech, she sees him, working tirelessly and how much he inspires her. He cries harder while reading these letters. If only they had more time, she could have told him herself. If only he had paid attention to anything other than his work, both his physical and mental health, maybe he wouldn't have been dying so quickly in the first place. Maybe she could have saved him, but in messing with the unpredictable shimmer, there was no chance of him saving her, and he's likely going to carry that forever. His body half purple, his mind half gone, not being able to break the thing that's both killing him and keeping him alive, he easily became the most tragic character in the show for me. The very close second, of course, being Jinx. Her origin story itself, being abandoned by her sister, saved by a man who calls her his daughter but treats her like a nuisance and fills her mind with enough emotional manipulation to rival a Gillian Flynn novel. Triggered by the return of her sister she assumed was dead, walking around with the enemy on her arm, her hallucinations, irrational thinking, and violence grow worse and worse. But it all explodes when she is augmented by Singed, shooting shimmer in her veins to revive her after Silco found her half dead. The shimmer brings out these things and turns them up to 100. Jinx recovering quickly enough to take Caitlyn, find Vi, and take her too, and gain the strength to include her father figure as well. They all sit tied to chairs at Jinx's table, Vi and Silco both shouting and pleading their cases at her. Vi obviously being more sympathetic and understanding, Silco telling Jinx that Vi is the enemy. Every lie he's filled her with since he found her. In this heated exchange, Jinx is overcome with the voices and overwhelmed with the images in her head and ends up shooting Silco, immediately regretting it. He dies in her hands, and she cries for him, and I think herself realizing what she had just done. She just proved what she thinks her sister thinks about her, right, if that makes sense. Any sympathy and understanding from Vi is clouded, at least for now, as Jinx leaves her and grabs a crystallized gadget of hers, a shark-shaped rocket, shooting that rocket right towards the room where the counselors stood, all voting unanimously in that exact moment for peace between them and the Undercity. Jinx ruined that, quite literally shattering it to pieces. Along the counselors in that room sat Victor, the one person who, as I keep mentioning, could have understood her.
Oh, the misery. Every single person is my enemy.
The only thing close to an interaction we get between Jinx and Victor is when Jinx sends one of her little gifts over to Piltover. And it's Victor with his engineering knowledge and everything that has to do with the crystal who takes apart the bomb and examines it. Both Mel and Jace are in the room with him, and he tells them,
Well, the form is crude, but the engineering is inspired.
any Jinx enjoyer up to this point would know how perfect of a sentence that is to describe not only her gadgetry, but her character and just who she is. An ultimate encapsulation of the resourceful, brilliant mind behind its corruption and...
Half a dozen enforcers dead. Enforcers dead.
Yeah.
A building.
unsavory behavior. If anyone could have the open, ever-curious mind to look past the quality of the outside and be impressed by the quality on the inside and how that mind created this weaponry that took his crystals, mind you, it's him. If only they had met beforehand and weren't both cursed with bad timing. Maybe they could have helped, or at least once again understood each other. Because it's likely in season 2, assuming that people in that room survived and Victor was one of them, given his shimmer shit. Still don't really know how that works. I don't really know the rules. Like, if you're blown up, do you get out of it because you're shimmered? Point is, if he is alive, that's something that both Jinx and Victor will be deprived of. From the people around them, from those they care about, and if they ever cross paths, each other. If only the timing was right. Oh, Jesus Christ, I look like a little boy. I could not wait to get this out of my hair. Oh my God. Anyway, this one was a little bit of a short one, but just one that I wanted to get out because I wanted to talk about it, and I figured it was time for an upload. Definitely expect more uploads in the coming year. Succession Season 3 is coming out in the spring. I am likely going to write at least 3 videos about that. I already have one in the making about the psychology of Connor Roy. So, hear me out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Please give me feedback in the comments. I love feedback. I don't like unwarranted criticism, but I love feedback. And let me know what you would want me to cover next, what you want me to watch next, because I do need ideas. And thank you for watching. I still don't have a proper outro yet. Goodbye.